It was a doozy, but guess what? Syracuse football beats NC State and are now 5-1.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. On tonight's podcast, Syracuse football just took down NC State 24-17 down in Raleigh. The Orange are now 2-1 in conference play, which actually equals the amount of conference wins they had all of last season. Also, by the way, Syracuse football is 5-1, which means they are one win away from getting to their third consecutive bowl game. They're not there yet. They still got to win one more game, but they are darn close, sitting pretty at 5-1. In this game, it was a doozy. At times, it made you feel like, oh my goodness, is this really bound to happen? But this team persevered, and they found a way to win, and we're going to break it all down here on tonight's podcast. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So why did Syracuse win this game, and why did NC State lose this game? I think those are the two big questions to start off this podcast that we have to answer. All right? I think that Syracuse won because every single time the door was open for NC State, the Orange had a counterpunch. Whether it was some luck or whether it was Syracuse actually making a play, Syracuse had a counterpunch every single time it looked like NC State might creep back into this. And by the way, I should preface this by saying Syracuse was the better team. They were the better team on paper. They were the better team coming into the building. They were favored to win this game. Yeah, they were on the road. It was definitely not an easy environment down in Raleigh, but that's a desperate team that was 3-3 at the time. Now they're 3-4. They're not looking too hot. They're obviously trying to get over 500. This was not going to be an easy game. Road ACC, and Syracuse won. All right? But they were supposed to win this game. Let's just get that out there. They were still supposed to win. Guess what? Every time NC State had an opportunity, Syracuse had a counterpunch. It started in the very beginning. Syracuse goes down the field. First drive of the game, they kick a field goal. The short passing game was working exceptionally well against NC State. We talked about it with Grayson Boone and Kenton Gibbs. They were worried about their linebackers. Well, short passing game really can expose linebacker play. And my goodness, they really exposed them tonight. Really did. But they're up 3-0. NC State stiffens. On the next drive, NC State has a 3rd and 5 in their own territory, and they convert it. But you ask, how did they convert it? Well, CJ Bailey, their true freshman quarterback, filling in for Grayson McCall in this game. He decides he wants to be super inaccurate with the ball. He throws the ball a yard behind his receiver. It deflects off of him. It's right in the air. But NC State catches it. And it made you feel like, oh my goodness, this could be one of those games. But guess what? This is where kind of the luck factor comes in, where Syracuse stiffens. That's a credit to them. They stiffen. NC State tries a field goal and they miss it. So the Orange stay up 3-0. What else happened in this game? Well, there were a couple of chances traded back and forth between these two teams. And eventually NC State is knocking on the door in the second quarter. They're looking to potentially take the lead. But guess what? This defense, this much maligned defense, which, by the way, was not perfect, and we'll get to the not so perfect parts later on in the podcast, as well as answering the question as to whether or not Syracuse might be back in the hunt? Question mark. All right. Back in the hunt, maybe. But anyway, NC State's driving, second quarter. Their running back fumbles. Derek McDonald with an excellent strip. NC State fumbles. Their first turnover of the game. Syracuse counters. 28-yard touchdown with Umari Hatcher. They go right down the field. And by the way, Shout out to Jeff Nixon for that play call. It was a 3rd and 1 on the NC State 28-yard line. And Syracuse was in 4-down territory. They obviously didn't trust their kicking game the entire night. And guess what? It's 3rd and 1. That is the perfect time to take a deep shot. That is exactly what they called. As soon as they called that play, as soon as I saw McCord drop back, I was like, oh my goodness, this was the perfect call. Because as long as McCord doesn't throw a pick, the worst thing that can happen is 4th and 1, and you're going forward anyway. They tried a deep shot. It worked. Back shoulder, Amari Hatcher, touchdown, 10-0 Syracuse. That is taking advantage of a mistake from NC State created by Syracuse. And by the way, all 3 of Syracuse's touchdowns were scored off NC State turnovers. I'm looking at the stats right now. I had it written down. I thought it was true. It is confirmed. That is exactly what happened in this game. That was the first one. McCord to Hatcher off the Derek McDonald strip of the running back near the red zone. That was big time for Syracuse. It put them up 10-0. Huge. Then, end of the half, Syracuse is up 10-3. Or actually, no, they're not up 10-3. They're up 10-0. Oh my goodness, it should have been 10-3. We don't need to have a whole discussion about the referees, but bottom line, it was a 4th and 2. The Syracuse defense stiffened, but on a field goal try, it was called illegal formation on the defense. They said that the defender on Syracuse, I believe it was Caden Brown, was lined up over the center, and to try to clear the air on this call, you don't have to actually be lined up directly over the center. It was kind of a ticky-tack call, but his shoulder was kind of in line with the center shoulder. You have to be completely outside of the body, but I'm not here to get into a whole debate about the call. They call that penalty. Of course, NC State capitalizes. They're only down 10-7 at the half. And you're thinking, oh my goodness. Or at least that's what I was thinking. Oh my goodness, what is going on here? We're clearly the better team. They outpossessed NC State 19-11 in the first half. They had more first downs, more yards. They were clearly the better team, but it's only 10-7 at the half, and NC State got the ball to start the third quarter. And this was arguably the biggest possession of the game. I thought this was the point of the game where it could go either way. All right? Because the game in my mind was still in the balance. Syracuse is only up 10-7. NC State gets the ball to start the second half. The Wolfpack, to their credit, they go right down the field. And I'm thinking, we're really about to blow this. Are we? Are we really about to blow it? But no. This defense, it stepped up again. This time, a corner blitz. How about that from Elijah Robinson? Screw the rush 3, drop 8. Why not bring a corner blitz that they don't see coming? Devin Grant comes screaming off the edge. Sack fumble on CJ Bailey. Syracuse recovers. I believe it was Justin Barron. Justin Barron had one of the other recoveries. Justin Barron had the recovery on the Derek McDonald on the Derek McDonald play. A defensive lineman got this one. A recovery on the strip sack. And guess what? It led to a Syracuse touchdown to put them up 17-7. That was the play right there. There were a lot of big ones, a lot of big moments. But in my mind, the play of the game, and I promise you, I wrote it down as a play, but I didn't think I would say it's the play of the game. It was the play of the game. The Devin Grant strip sack on CJ Bailey completely changed it because Syracuse then goes up 17-7. And at that point, you're thinking that Syracuse is going to win. That somehow they're going to find a way to win, which is exactly what they did. Once again, Syracuse beats NC State 24-17 on the road. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse. We're breaking it all down here tonight. We're going over just a general game recap, the play of the game, the Devin Grant strip sack on CJ Bailey at the opening of the second half led to a Syracuse touchdown and take a 17-7 lead. Now coming up, we'll further recap the game, go over some parts that aren't necessarily perfect. And then at the end of this podcast, is Syracuse back in the hunt? I'll answer that question after this. Look, I won't lie. I was a bit on the fence about pre-alcohol initially, but then while hanging out with friends, I gave it a shot, and believe me, it's the real deal. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to ZBiotics.com/LockedOnCollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to ZBiotics.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. In Syracuse football, they closed as a 1.5-point favorite over on FanDuel. The line at one point was at 4.5. It kept trending in NC State's favor, but guess what? Syracuse won 24-17. Maybe the odds makers know what they're doing. Sometimes they don't, but most of the time they do. And maybe it shouldn't have been down to 1.5. Like everyone should have. Everyone was, I think, betting on NC State. That's what happened. But those people were out of luck, I guess. Syracuse wins 24-17. If you want to take advantage of another bet, just visit FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. So we left off with, in my opinion, the play of the game, which is when NC State is driving at the beginning of the second half, and Elijah Robinson, the defensive coordinator for Syracuse, calls a corner blitz by Devin Grant, and Devin Grant does not miss. He goes untouched into CJ Bailey, sack fumble, Syracuse recovers, and on that drive, it leads to a Syracuse touchdown. Instead of potentially having a tie game at 10-10 or even NC State taking a 14-10 lead, Syracuse gets a 10 to 14 point swing in their favor. They take a 17-7 lead early on in the second half. So once again, all three touchdowns were scored off NC State turnovers. We've gone over the first two, but then there is the third one, obviously. The third one, I believe this was the end of the third quarter when this happened. Yes, I have it in my notes. It was the end of the third quarter. NC State, once again, they're driving. Credit to them. They had converted a big 4th and 12 earlier in the drive. I wouldn't have gone for it, only down 10 points in the third quarter, but I get the desperation, I guess. You don't necessarily trust your defense will get a stop. I get it. It's the Syracuse offense. They're going to move the ball. They're going to score points. And credit to the NC State defense, they only scored 24. Could have been a lot more if they trusted their field goal kicker, but you get the idea. All right. And Justin Barron, I thought he had a heck of a game. It was his best game of the season, was in the right spot at the right time. It was on a 1st and 20 play, and CJ Bailey, I don't know if it was necessarily a bad throw, but we talked about how in the first quarter, how a ball batted off an NC State receiver right into NC State. Well, guess what? It all evens out. Not just on the fact that they missed a field goal, but then late in the third quarter, it bounces right into the hands of Justin Barron, who then goes on a big return. And then the broadcast cuts away, but you see there's a flag down. Now, I know intuition that this play is going to hold up, like the turnover is going to happen. But the broadcast cuts out and they don't tell you what the flag is. They didn't tell you. And I'm like, well, was the flag on the return? Was there excessive celebration? Most of the time when you see a flag on an interception or a change of possession at the end of a play, it's usually on the team that just got the ball. That's usually how it is. Excessive celebration, illegal block in the back, whatever it is. Well, it turns out it was on NC State. NC State got a 15-yard penalty for, I don't know, someone got in Fidel Diggs' face, which is not a good idea. But someone got in Fidel Diggs' face, got flagged 15 yards. It set Syracuse up in golden position, and they capitalized. Jackson Meeks got the touchdown. He had a heck of a game. And let me pull up the stat sheet, what Jackson Meeks did. He was the leading receiver, 11 catches, 116, and 1 touchdown. So, yeah, another great game from Jackson Meeks. He was sensational, the wide receiver 1 on this team. Number 1 outside wide receiver, at least. That's how they converted. They took a 24-7 lead. But the game did not end there. And this is where we get into maybe some of the imperfections of the game, which really reared its ugly head in the back stages of the fourth quarter, really the second half of the fourth quarter. All right, Syracuse up 24-7. They're in full control. And then a play or two later, you just can't let up a big play. Let them march down the field all you want. NC State gets like a damn near 80-yard touchdown on a broken play. CJ Bailey was rolling to his right. He hits his receiver wide open down the field. And here's the deal with that play, because I know you guys are going to comment, oh, what about the officials? The officials sucked. And they do suck. I agree with you. I think on this play, I think we can all be reasonable. 2 things can be true. Number 1, the receiver was clearly out of bounds, entered back the field of play, which means technically he cannot touch the ball first. He was not forced out of bounds like the replay booth said. That's what the ruling was. They ruled that not that he wasn't out of bounds, they ruled that he was forced out of bounds. He was not forced out of bounds. If that's forced out of bounds, then every tackle is unnecessary roughness. There is no way he was forced out of bounds, okay? That play should not have counted. Should not have counted. All right? But this is where I say 2 things can be true. I think we can all be reasonable and say that in that situation, you have a 17-point lead with about 7-ish minutes to go in the game. You just can't let anyone get behind you. That's it. And on that play, there was no defender behind that receiver. You just got to play prevent defense, and they didn't execute well there. And to be honest, him stepping out of bounds, should the play have counted? No, but it really did not impact Syracuse defending that play. At least from what I saw. That is something that going forward has to be fixed. That in a prevent defense situation, you just got to let the opposing team take their 5 or 10 yards and move on. All right? Then Syracuse makes a couple of great conversions. They chew a lot of the clock. They go for it on a 4th and 7 in the red zone, but again, they weren't kicking the ball. They didn't trust their field goal game. And they get stopped. They're still up 24-14. They're in good position. Same situation, though, as the previous drive. Just don't allow a big play. There's 3 minutes to go in the game. NC State has 1 or 2 timeouts left. Just don't let up a big play and you win. Well, they didn't really let anyone behind them. The issue here was tackling. A 4-yard check down turns into a 72-yard catch and run because 4 or 5 players just, quite frankly, they whiffed on a tackle. They whiffed. That's not on the defensive coordinator. That's not on coaching. I mean, they just make a tackle. Even if the guy broke a tackle and got 10 yards, it's not the end of the world. It turned into 72, but credit to the defense. Once again, they forced 3 turnovers, and credit for them for holding NC State to a field goal. Credit to them. They got a big sack. It forced NC State to call a timeout, I believe. They stopped them in the end, 24-17. Syracuse redeems itself from the Georgia Tech game. They get the onside kick, and it was a very good onside kick. That ball hopped in the air perfectly, 10 yards down the field, but Jackson Meeks, the hands team was on. He comes up with the onside kick, and Syracuse wins this game 24-17. Whew. Is that a good enough recap? I hope it was. This team is fun. They're exciting. And they're also frustrating all in one. It's really exciting. It makes wins all that more sweeter when it's a little bit frustrating, at least in my opinion. Because you're like prepared for a win, and all of a sudden they let up a 72-yard play, and you're like, what? What? Who cares? Once again, Syracuse up 24-7, or Syracuse wins 24-17 over NC State on the road, 2-1 in conference play, 5-1 overall. Now coming up is Syracuse back in the hunt. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Once again, Syracuse beats NC State down in Raleigh 24-17. Leave a comment below your thoughts on the game. And also, is Syracuse back in the hunt? And I'm going to give my take on this if they are back in the hunt. I am going to say they are back in the hunt, but they are not a contender just yet. I want to see more. It's early. I want to sleep on it. This was definitely one of the better games that Syracuse has played this season. Some stuff to clean up. But overall, it was a really positive effort, good performance all around. Offense and defense. Special teams didn't really have to do all that much because they didn't really try. So, is Syracuse a contender? Not yet. Not yet, but they are back in the hunt at 5-1. I think they have recovered from the Stanford loss because they beat UNLV and they beat NC State. Those are the two teams that they definitely had to beat. And now next week, they get Pitt. Now let's talk about Pitt. This doesn't have to necessarily be an early preview of it. We got plenty of time to go over Pitt. They look kind of shaky against Cal, and they were at home. I know they won. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I don't think Syracuse is going to be favored at Pitt, but they can win that game, all right? And if Syracuse beats Pitt, we're back in the hunt. Not back in the hunt. We're back in contention. We are in the hunt to be in contention right now. That is the best way to put it, because honestly, it's right there. It's right there for Syracuse to take this. It really is. Think about their schedule for a second. If they beat Pitt on the road, which is not next week, but the week after on a Thursday night, we got another bye week coming up. How are we going to look after our bye week? Saw what happened against Stanford. Not great. After Pitt, you got Virginia Tech at home. That's a winnable game. At Boston College, it's a winnable game, right? You just went into NC State and won. You can go into Boston College and win. At Cal. Now, Cal is one of those teams I don't think is very good, but they seem to be the team that is either going to pull off an upset or close to an upset, right? They upset Auburn in Auburn earlier in the year. They should have beaten Miami, but they decided to blow a 20-plus point lead to them. They almost beat Pitt on the road today. That game might not be easy. UConn, I mean, that's their bank-in win to be a bowl team. And then you got Miami at the end of the year to close. Miami at the end of the year to close. And we talked about Miami earlier this week. Are they really good? Yes, they are really good. But they don't look unbeatable. Do I think that Syracuse is really going to run the table? If you put a lie detector test to me, it would come up no. But it's right there in front of them. This team does not have it. We talked about this in the preseason about how this team doesn't have the most daunting schedule in the world. Well, here's where you got to take advantage. You're in position. You're 5-1. You're 2-1 in the conference. Find a way to beat Pitt next week, and then we can really start talking about ACC contention. So once again, Syracuse, they take down NC State 24-17. They handle their business as a road favorite within the conference. The defense forced 3 takeaways. All 3 takeaways led to touchdowns for Syracuse. Wasn't necessarily a back and forth game. The Orange really controlled it for the most part. Just happy they got the W. We'll break it down more in the days to come here on this podcast. But everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. And everyone, take care.